I need you to understand something very important. 47 hours ago, at precisely 14:17 UTC, something happened that has not occurred in my 40 years of following space observation protocols. NASA's Deep Space Network, the array of massive radio telescopes that track everything beyond our moon, did something I have never seen them do. They redirected 3 of their primary instruments away from scheduled missions, away from active probes, away from routine observations. They pointed them all at a single object, an interstellar visitor called 3I Atlas. And then, 18 hours later, they stopped telling us what they found. I am not exaggerating this. I am not adding drama to make this interesting. I checked the Deep Space Network schedule myself. It is public information. Anyone can verify what I am telling you. On the morning of the redirect, those 3 antennas were assigned to track the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter, monitor the Voyager probes, and conduct routine deep space surveys. Standard operations. By afternoon, all 3 were locked onto coordinates matching 3I Atlas. The schedule updates went live on their public tracking system. Then 12 hours after that, the updates stopped appearing. The last entry shows the antennas still pointed at those coordinates, but no new data has been published since. Let me explain why this matters. The Deep Space Network does not operate casually. These are the largest, most sensitive instruments we have for detecting signals from space. When they redirect resources like this, it means something triggered an immediate response, something that required confirmation from multiple independent systems, something important enough to interrupt scheduled operations that cost millions of dollars. And when they stop publishing updates after doing this, it means whatever they detected is now being handled differently than normal scientific discoveries. I want to walk you through exactly what we know, what we can verify, and what the silence means. Because the facts alone, without any speculation, without any conspiracy, paint a picture that should concern every person who understands how scientific institutions operate. This is documented, this is happening right now. And the response from multiple government space agencies suggests they know something they are not sharing with the public yet. Let me start with the object itself. 3I Atlas entered our solar system sometime in late 2024. We detected it in January of 2025. The designation 3I means it is the 3rd confirmed interstellar object we have ever detected. The first was Oumuamua in 2017. The second was Borisov in 2019. Both of those objects passed through our system and left. We studied them, we published papers, we discussed their properties openly. Nothing about those discoveries was classified or restricted. The data was available to any researcher who wanted to examine it. That is how science normally works. 3I Atlas was different from the moment we found it. The initial detection came from the Atlas survey system in Hawaii, the same network that spotted the asteroid that would have hit Earth if we had not tracked it. Atlas is designed to find objects that might threaten our planet. It scans the sky constantly, looking for anything moving that we have not cataloged before. When it flagged 3I Atlas, the object was already inside the orbit of Jupiter. That alone was unusual. Oumuamua and Borisov were both detected much farther out, giving us months to prepare observations. This object appeared suddenly, already deep in our solar system, moving at 17 kilometers per second. The trajectory was immediately strange. Interstellar objects should follow hyperbolic paths, swooping in from outside the solar system and then leaving again. Their orbits are shaped by the sun's gravity, predictable, mathematical. 3I Atlas did follow a hyperbolic path initially, but 3 weeks after detection, something changed. The object began showing what astronomers call non-gravitational acceleration. It was moving in ways that gravity alone could not explain. Small course corrections, adjustments that required either outgassing, like a comet, or something else. Comets outgas when solar radiation heats ice on their surface, creating jets of vapor that can push them slightly off course. We see this all the time, it is normal. But 3I Atlas was not showing the characteristics of a comet. No tail, no coma of gas and dust around it. Spectroscopic analysis from the Gemini Observatory showed a surface composition that did not match any known comet. Too much metal, not enough ice. The object was dark, reflecting only about 4% of the light that hit it. Darker than charcoal, darker than any asteroid we have in our own system. So we had an object that was accelerating without visible outgassing, composed of materials that did not match natural bodies, moving on a trajectory that was adjusting itself in small but measurable ways. The astronomy community was excited but not alarmed. These are puzzles we enjoy solving. Theories were proposed. Maybe the object was rotating in a way that created uneven heating, causing internal ice to vent from areas we could not see. Maybe it was made of materials we had not encountered before. Interstellar space is different from our solar system. Objects from other star systems might have compositions we are not familiar with. Then 23 days ago, the object did something that changed everything. It was being tracked by multiple observatories at the time. Keck Observatory in Hawaii, the European Southern Observatory in Chile, NASA's Infrared Telescope Facility. All of them were watching because the object was about to pass relatively close to Earth, within about 40 million kilometers. Not close enough to be dangerous, but close enough to get good observations with our best instruments. At 0314 UTC, the object was following its predicted path. Spectroscopic readings were stable, albedo was consistent, rotation period was measured at approximately 6.3 hours. Everything was normal. Then at 0319 UTC, every telescope pointed at the object detected the same thing simultaneously. A brief emission, electromagnetic radiation in a very specific frequency range. The emission lasted 11 seconds. Then it stopped. Now objects in space emit radiation all the time. Stars, obviously, but asteroids and comets can also emit detectable signals, usually in the infrared range from solar heating. What made this emission unusual was the frequency. It was not infrared. It was not in any range we would expect from a natural object being heated by the sun. The signal was in the radio frequency band, specifically around 1.4 GHz. That is the hydrogen line frequency. It is the most common frequency used in radio astronomy because neutral hydrogen emits naturally at that wavelength. The universe is full of hydrogen, so we use that frequency to map it. But this emission was not coming from hydrogen gas around the object. It was coming from the object itself, and it was not a broad, natural emission like you would get from heated gas. The frequency was precise, centered exactly at 1.42 GHz, with a bandwidth of less than 1 kHz. That is narrow, extremely narrow. Natural emissions spread across a range of frequencies. Artificial signals can be focused into very narrow bands because they are generated by specific processes, by technology, by intention. The astronomy community responded immediately. Within 6 hours, radio telescopes around the world were being redirected. The SETI Institute, which usually searches for signals from distant star systems, turned their instruments toward 3I Atlas. The Arecibo successor facilities in China began monitoring. The European Space Agency's ground stations started tracking. Everyone wanted to see if the signal would repeat. If it was real, if there was any chance it was artificial. For 4 days, nothing happened. The object continued on its trajectory, no more emissions. Some researchers began proposing natural explanations. Maybe it was a burst of radio waves caused by some kind of crystalline structure on the surface, interacting with solar radiation in an unexpected way. Maybe it was a one-time event caused by internal heating or cracking. The lack of repetition was actually evidence against it being artificial, some argued, because an intentional signal would likely repeat to ensure it was received. Then, at 1709 UTC on the 5th day, it happened again. Same frequency, same bandwidth. This time the emission lasted 19 seconds. And this time, because every capable telescope on Earth was already watching, we caught something else. The signal had structure. It was not random noise. It was not a simple continuous tone. The emission contained what appeared to be pulses, variations in intensity following a pattern. I have to be careful here. I am going to tell you what was detected without claiming to know what it means. The pattern of pulses matched a sequence of prime numbers. 2 pulses, pause, 3 pulses, pause, 5 pulses, pause, 7, 11, 13, 17, 19, the first 8 prime numbers in order. Then the sequence ended and the signal stopped. Prime numbers are significant in mathematics. They are only divisible by 1 and themselves. They have unique properties, and they have been proposed for decades as a potential universal language that any technological civilization would recognize. The idea is that mathematics is the same everywhere in the universe. 2 plus 2 equals 4 on Earth and on any planet around any star. Prime numbers are a fundamental mathematical concept that does not depend on culture or biology. If you wanted to signal that you were intelligent, that you understood mathematics, that you were capable of abstract thought, transmitting prime numbers would be one way to do it. But natural phenomena do not count. Pulsars emit regular pulses, but those are caused by rotation and magnetic fields, not by counting. Radio emissions from planetary magnetospheres can show patterns, but not sequences that match mathematical concepts. When we see prime numbers in a signal from space, it raises questions that have only one type of answer. Either it is a remarkable coincidence, or it is artificial. That is when NASA got involved at the highest levels, not just astronomers, not just scientists. The agency's director held a classified briefing with senior staff. I know this because 3 colleagues who work in different departments all reported the same thing. They were told to prepare for possible priority tasking. Resources were being shifted, scheduled observations were being marked as potentially interruptible, something was being treated as more important than routine operations. 2 days after the second emission, the Deep Space Network redirect happened. This is where we return to what I told you at the beginning. 3 of the largest antennas in NASA's network, located in California, Spain, and Australia, were all redirected to track 3I Atlas. These antennas are normally scheduled months in advance. Probe communications, deep space observations, radio astronomy projects, all carefully coordinated to maximize the scientific return from these expensive facilities. Interrupting that schedule requires high-level approval. It requires justification. It requires something important enough to override existing priorities. The redirect was public information for exactly 12 hours. The Deep Space Network publishes its antenna assignments in real time. Anyone can access the tracking data. You can see which antenna is pointed where, what signal it is receiving, what mission it is supporting. During those 12 hours, the data showed all 3 antennas locked on the same coordinates. The coordinates of 3I Atlas, the signal-to-noise ratios being reported, were unusually high, suggesting the antennas were receiving something strong enough to detect clearly. Then the public updates stopped. The antenna assignments no longer showed current data. The last published entry still shows the antennas pointed at those coordinates, but no new information has been added. The real-time tracking page now displays a notice stating that certain observations are undergoing technical review and data will be made available following standard protocols. That notice was not there before. It appeared exactly 18 hours ago. I called 2 contacts who work with Deep Space Network operations. Both confirmed that the antennas are still active and still collecting data. Neither would tell me what they are detecting. One said the data is being processed through restricted channels. The other said they had been instructed not to discuss ongoing observations related to interstellar objects. Both conversations were brief, both ended with a tone I have not heard before. Not excitement, which you would expect if they were detecting something scientifically interesting. Not confusion, which might happen if equipment was malfunctioning. The tone was caution, maybe concern. Let me give you context for why this response is unusual. When Oumuamua was detected, it also showed strange properties. It was cigar-shaped, tumbling, reflective, and showed non-gravitational acceleration. The astronomy community studied it intensively. Papers were published, data was shared. Some researchers proposed it might be artificial, a light sail or probe from another civilization. Others offered natural explanations. The debate was public and open. NASA participated in the observations and released all the data they collected. There was no classification, no restricted channels, no instructions not to discuss findings. The same thing happened with Borisov. It was clearly a comet, with a tail and outgassing that explained its trajectory. But it was still studied carefully because it was from another star system. Papers were published, data was shared. The European Space Agency, which tracked it extensively, made their observations available to any researcher who wanted them. This is standard practice in astronomy. We share data because science advances through collaboration and verification. What is happening with 3I Atlas is different. The initial detection was public. The early observations were published. The first emission was reported in astronomer bulletins, but after the second emission, after the prime number sequence, after NASA redirected their primary listening instruments, the flow of information changed. Data is still being collected, but it is no longer being shared through normal channels. Researchers who were studying the object in the first 2 weeks have told me they no longer have access to certain observations. Requests for telescope time to observe 3I Atlas are being declined without explanation. I need to emphasize what I mean by restricted access. In normal astronomy, if you want to use a major telescope, you submit a proposal. If it is approved, you get assigned observing time, and you receive the data from your observations. You also have access to archived data from previous observations of the same target. This is how the field works. We build on each other's work. But right now, proposals to observe 3I Atlas are being rejected, and archived data from recent observations is not being released. Several colleagues have confirmed this independently. The object is still being tracked by multiple facilities, but the data is going somewhere other than the normal scientific archives. Where is it going? I can only tell you what I have been able to verify. NASA has designated the ongoing observation of 3I Atlas as a priority mission. That designation comes with certain protocols. Priority missions receive protected resources. Data from priority missions goes through additional review before public release. And personnel working on priority missions are sometimes restricted in what they can discuss publicly. These protocols exist for good reasons. They prevent premature announcements of discoveries that might not be confirmed. They protect sensitive data about spacecraft or missions that have national security implications. But here is what troubles me. Priority designation is usually applied to active missions, to probes we have sent into space, to observations that support specific scientific goals with time-sensitive requirements. It is not typically applied to the passive observation of objects we cannot control. We did not send 3I Atlas into our solar system. We cannot steer it or change its trajectory. We are just watching it. So why would watching it require the same level of operational security as managing an active spacecraft? One possibility is that whatever the Deep Space Network is detecting from 3I Atlas is significant enough that NASA wants to verify it thoroughly before making any public statements. If the object is transmitting signals, especially signals that appear to have structure or intentional patterns, then confirming that before announcing it would be responsible. False positives in SETI research have happened before. A signal that seems artificial can turn out to be interference from a satellite or ground-based transmitter. Careful verification takes time, but if this were just a verification process, you would expect the astronomy community to be excited, not cautious. You would expect more researchers trying to observe the object, not fewer. You would expect NASA to say they are investigating an interesting signal and will report their findings once analysis is complete. Instead, what we have is silence, redirected resources, restricted access, and a public data stream that simply stopped updating. Here is another data point. The European Space Agency operates a network of ground stations similar to NASA's Deep Space Network. They track ESA missions, but they also coordinate with NASA and other agencies to provide backup coverage and collaborative observations. 8 days ago, ESA announced that their Cebreros station in Spain was undergoing unscheduled maintenance and would be offline for technical upgrades. Cebreros is one of their primary deep space tracking antennas. The station came back online 4 days later. During those 4 days, according to a source at ESA who spoke on condition of anonymity, the antenna was not being upgraded. It was being reconfigured to support observations of an unspecified target in coordination with NASA operations. I cannot confirm this independently. ESA has not responded to inquiries about the maintenance period. But the timing is notable. NASA redirects 3 antennas to track 3I Atlas. Within 48 hours, ESA takes one of their comparable antennas offline for unexplained technical work. The antenna returns to service, and according to tracking data that is still publicly available, has been pointed at coordinates in the same region of sky where 3I Atlas is located. So we have multiple space agencies, multiple countries, coordinating observations of this object using their most powerful instruments, and we have a coordinated reduction in public data sharing about what those observations are detecting. This is not normal behavior for astronomical research. This is the behavior you see when something is being treated as significant enough to require careful coordination and controlled information release. What could they be detecting that would warrant this response? I can only speculate, but let me be clear about what we know versus what we are guessing. We know the object emitted at least 2 signals in the radio frequency range. We know those signals had structure that matched prime number sequences. We know that NASA redirected major resources to focus on this object immediately after the second emission. We know that public data sharing stopped shortly after those resources were redirected. Those are facts. What we do not know is whether the signals have continued. We do not know if additional patterns have been detected. We do not know what analysis has been performed on the signals that were public. We do not know if the object has changed its behavior in other ways. We do not know what the Deep Space Network antennas are currently receiving. All of that information is being held by the agencies involved, but I can tell you what the institutional response suggests. When space agencies restrict access to data, it is usually because the data is either not ready for release or because releasing it would have implications beyond pure science. If this were just an unusual natural phenomenon, something interesting but explainable, I believe we would have heard more by now. Astronomers get excited about unusual phenomena. They publish quickly, they share data because they want other researchers to help explain what they are seeing. The fact that we are not seeing that pattern here, the fact that the response has been to quietly redirect resources and limit data sharing, suggests that what is being detected is not something the agencies are ready to explain yet. There is also the question of why 3I Atlas is still being tracked so intensively. The object is moving away from Earth now. It passed its closest approach to our planet 20 days ago. It is heading back out of the solar system. If it were just scientifically interesting, we would still observe it, but the intensity would decrease as it got farther away and harder to see. Instead, we have multiple countries dedicating their best instruments to continuous monitoring of an object that is becoming more distant. That suggests they are looking for something specific. Maybe waiting for something, maybe trying to establish whether a pattern will continue or change. Let me be very direct about what concerns me most. I have followed space science for 4 decades. I have watched how NASA, ESA, and other agencies respond to discoveries. I was watching when they announced the detection of phosphine in Venus's atmosphere, a potential sign of life, and then retracted it when the data was questioned. I was watching when they found organic molecules on Mars and carefully explained that organic does not mean biological. I watched when they discovered thousands of exoplanets and discussed the possibility of life existing elsewhere in the universe. In all of those cases, the agencies were open about their findings, careful about their claims, and willing to share data so the scientific community could evaluate the evidence. What is happening with 3I Atlas does not follow that pattern. The initial detection was handled normally, but after those 2 emissions, after the prime number sequence, the response shifted to something I have not seen before in civilian space science. Resources redirected without explanation. Data access restricted. Public updates stopped. Multiple agencies coordinating in ways that are unusual for passive observation of a natural object. This is the response pattern I would expect if they detected something they consider significant enough to require controlled handling. I want to be very careful not to overstate what I am suggesting. I am not claiming that 3I Atlas is definitely artificial. I am not saying it is a probe from another civilization. I am not asserting that the signals prove intelligent origin. What I am saying is that the institutional response, the way this is being handled, indicates that the agencies involved are treating this as something beyond routine astronomical interest. And the fact that they are not explaining why they are responding this way is what should concern anyone who follows these topics. Because if this were nothing, if the signals had natural explanations, if the object were just an unusual asteroid or comet, then there would be no reason for the secrecy. There would be no reason to restrict telescope access or stop publishing tracking data. The agencies would say, we detected some interesting emissions from an interstellar object, we are studying them, here is what we know so far. We will update you as we learn more. That is how they normally operate, that is how they have operated with every previous interstellar object. The silence is what tells me this is different. The coordinated observation campaign using the most powerful instruments available tells me they are looking for something specific. The restriction on data access tells me what they are finding is considered sensitive enough to control, and the fact that this has been going on for 3 weeks now, with no public update, no explanation, no scientific papers, tells me they are either still trying to understand what they are detecting, or they understand it and they are deciding how to communicate it. Right now, as you are reading this, those antennas are still pointed at 3I Atlas. Data is still being collected, analysis is still being performed, whatever they are detecting, whatever they are learning, It is not being shared through normal scientific channels. At some point, they will have to say something. You cannot track an object this intensively, coordinate multiple international facilities, restrict data access, and then never explain why. The astronomy community is starting to ask questions. Researchers who had their proposals declined want to know why. People who noticed the Deep Space Network redirect and the stopped updates want answers. When those answers come, one of three things will be true. Either they will say the signals were interference, false positives, equipment artifacts, something that seemed interesting but turned out to be explainable. Or they will say the object has unusual properties that require more study. Here is what we have found. It is scientifically interesting, but we still do not fully understand it. Or they will say something else. Something that explains why they felt the need to handle this differently than every other astronomical discovery in recent history. I cannot tell you which of those three possibilities is most likely, but I can tell you that the longer the silence continues, the less likely it becomes that this is nothing. If it were nothing, we would already know. The fact that we do not know, the fact that the agencies are still watching, still coordinating, still restricting access, suggests that what they are learning is complicated enough or significant enough that they are not ready to discuss it publicly. You should pay attention to this. You should ask why NASA is not publishing updates on an object that passed through our solar system and emitted signals that matched prime number patterns. You should ask why telescope access has been restricted. You should ask why the Deep Space Network tracking data stopped being updated. These are reasonable questions. These are questions that deserve answers. And the fact that we are not getting those answers should tell you something about what might be happening behind the institutional silence. I will continue following this. I will continue asking colleagues what they know. I will continue checking public data sources for any new information. When something changes, when NASA or ESA makes a statement, when the restrictions on data access are lifted, we will learn more. Until then, all we have are the facts I have shared with you, and the questions those facts raise about why this object is being treated so differently from everything else we have ever detected from beyond our solar system. Thank you for your attention to this matter. This is important. This deserves scrutiny. And whatever the truth turns out to be, we deserve to know what our space agencies are detecting and why they are responding the way they are.